Welcome to Foresight Radio. I'm your host, Tom Koulopoulos. On each episode, we explore the many trends that are shaping the way we will work, live, and play in the future. Our focus is on the disruptive and transformational trends that are changing the way the world works in ways that are often invisible. Our objective is simple: give you the knowledge and the insights that you need to better manage the future. Foresight Radio is sponsored by our good friends at Wasabi. You can learn more about them at wasabi.com. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the evolution of AI and what has to be one of the most widely discussed topics in technology and in business today. Our guest is Jack Crawford. Jack has been in the technology space for 3 decades and is the founder of 3 technology companies. His most recent was Datalog AI, a company that focused on the development of AI-enabled chatbots. Jack was also a captain in the United States Air Force. My conversation with Jack looked at a broad range of AI topics, from its evolution to the fear factor that often surrounds it, to the impact it will have on nation-states and the balance of power, all the way down to the specific ways in which it can be used by your business to create new value and new opportunity. Here's my conversation with Jack Crawford. So Jack, you've got a long history working with AI. Give us some perspective from your standpoint, having seen the evolution of AI. What is different today?
Let me summarize it first and then maybe go into a little more detail on my viewpoint. That is that we've moved from the age of rules to the age of machines learning and us not really understanding how they learn, which is closer to human learning than it is to traditional programming.
So that's a point that gets brought up a lot, this notion of AI doing things without us necessarily understanding why it does those things. And I think that scares a lot of people, right? So when you look at the evolution of AI, is part of the challenge the fact that we're just afraid of it, or has it fundamentally been an absence of the right technology to make it happen?
It's a little bit of both as far as the technology being available. It isn't related to the lack of understanding of how to make computers learn, but the computing power required to create something useful wasn't available to the everyday business and even large businesses. So there were exceptions in government and exceptions in large organizations that had capital and high return for using algorithms that were trained with neural networks. This isn't widely known, but you can see the papers going back at least a decade or more about neural networks, which is a subcategory of the area of machine learning, where computers are learning how to do a task or look for a pattern or try to find something within data that's a needle in the haystack. Many people talk about the game of Go and how Google was able to defeat the best human on the planet. The reason why I don't like that example is it's a very big problem and involved a lot of computing resources. And it dissuades businesses from trying to do something new. And what's really available today with the advent of these fast processors that you can install in a personal computer, that anyone can build a machine learning algorithm and seek to automate a task or seek to have something learn how to do a task and how to execute it. And that's what's changed. It isn't the idea of AI, it's the ability to do it.
I had a chance several months ago to listen to Garry Kasparov, who was the world's reigning chess champion in the 1990s, talk about his match against IBM's Deep Blue, which was the first computer to win against a grandmaster in 1997, I believe it was. And he talked about the fact that Deep Blue really wasn't AI. At best, it was machine learning, but really it was a matter of brute force computing that could think ahead many more moves than its human opponent could. Here's Garry Kasparov at a recent Global Retail Marketing Association meeting talking about Deep Blue, the IBM computer that he lost to in 1997, and also commenting on whether Deep Blue was in fact intelligent. Here's Garry Kasparov.
Deep Blue was phenomenally fast. Even by today's measurements, it could reach a speed of 200 million positions per second. And again, machine doesn't have to solve the game. All it has to do is just to make sure that it will not be making the last mistake. I can tell you Deep Blue was not intelligent at all. It was as intelligent as your alarm clock. A very expensive one, about $10 million worth. But still an alarm clock.
And I think for a long time, what has been passed off as AI has been more and more powerful computers. So now we're being told, wait a minute, there's a brute force approach, there's a machine learning approach, and there's an AI approach. And I think people are genuinely confused between those 3 categories. Can you clarify that a bit for us? Is there some way to simply understand what the differences are between those three labels that we use to describe levels of intelligence for a machine?
Well, there's something you said about the master chess player, about it not being AI. Where that falls out of the way is that there is not one type of AI. AI doesn't include only these unsupervised methods to have a machine learn, but almost anything to get the job done. And at the beginning, that first category are systems that act. So if we think about cruise control in a car, is that artificial intelligence? Not really, but it's pretty smart. It's able to adjust your acceleration and your brakes based on how fast it's going. Over time, sensors were used to be able to detect the car in front of you and slow your car down, but those were rule-based. Could it learn different traffic conditions and not use rules to be able to do a better job of that? And that's what we've seen lately. So it's a matter of bringing new methods in. And as I said earlier, they're not new methods. It's just methods that now we can create in a reasonable amount of time. So I like to think of the human body. We have a head, we have arms, we have legs, and we have organs and other useful parts of our body, the circulatory system, for example, and the nervous system. And most of the body is used to keep the brain alive. It's a life support system. And the five senses, remarkably, the sensors are located in the head right close to the brain, so they have the shortest distance possible to interact with the brain where the processing is occurring. If we lose our brains, our entire function degrades. So when you think about an automobile, those sensors are largely electromechanical. It's taking data, it pulls it in. There's no artificial intelligence about data being captured from a radar or from a camera or by sound. But those things collectively can feed into algorithms that have been created to give best guesses of what something might be. And then the last part would be applying the rules. For example, don't exceed the speed limit. Well, that means you need to know what the speed limit is. So you either remember or you read it off a sign. So what's happening with AI? Well, all that data is in Google Maps. What is the speed limit? What kind of road are you on? How fast are the other cars going? And that processing involves applying rules to your situation. The decision about how do you react to the situation is where we begin to use these systems that have learned without us really understanding how they have. There's an important point to make about systems that involve human safety, flying an airplane, driving a car, running a nuclear power plant. Those systems require a lot more testing of these advanced forms of AI so that you can take the risk out of the use of them. And now it becomes a risk-adjusted decision where you look at whether this particular application of artificial intelligence is actually safer than human action.
I think for some time we will be having a fairly lively debate because although we can prove mathematically that a certain AI-driven device, an autonomous vehicle, for example, may be safer than one driven by a human being, there's an emotional attachment to that process of driving, and we want to believe that as humans, we simply are better at certain tasks than the machine could ever be. And when the machine makes a mistake, we certainly hold it to a much higher standard than we hold ourselves. So while mathematically it might be safer and there may be less risk involved in the machine doing the particular task, we don't want to believe that.
It's just a matter of time, I believe. It's not that it won't happen, this change in perception. So let's think about horse-drawn carriages. When automobiles, these noisy machines came along that didn't have horses in front of them, began to show up on the roads, they scared horses because horses weren't used to them. So laws were put in place to have automobile drivers turn off their engines when they were at an intersection until all the horses passed. As we see today, unless you're in Amish country, you're not really allowed to have a horse-drawn carriage on a freeway or a major public road without some kind of exception. That's the first example I think of. And the second one is the one in your book. I don't know if your listeners have had a chance to get this far in your book, but the Air France example is one where the humans made a decision despite the warnings that the system was providing. So the existence of an automated system changed nothing.
There is this element of human arrogance that we have to factor into the equation. And I think that the only way, as you said, to outgrow that is over time to have reinforcement from the experience with AI that says to us there is an aspect of how we collaborate with this device or how we allow it to perform certain tasks that is in fact going to be much more effective, much safer, much less risky than if we did it ourselves. So you've been at this for some time, Jack. Here's a question that I'd love to have you shed some light on. What's the timeline look like Because we have, on the one hand, folks like Ray Kurzweil who tell us that we will achieve machine intelligence that is equivalent to the intelligence of the entire human race within the next 50 years. At what point do you think we will accept AI as a necessary part of our world so that we mere mortals are using it in our devices, in our homes, in our cars, without having these debates around safety and risk? We simply accept it and we look back and wonder how we ever lived without it. Is that a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year horizon?
I think it's the timing may not be as important as who adopts it first. So if we go back, just recent memory in the last decade was the advent of smartphones. At the beginning, consumers bought it to some degree, and it began to pick up steam. It began to outperform other sales of other types of phones, and people were pitching their BlackBerries if they had one, or they had some Nokia phone and get an iPhone. That didn't happen in business. It took another 2 years for businesses to set rules in place, to provide the mitigation from data escaping by putting in controls like McAfee's controls on phones. And that's what's necessary for business applications where we're talking about AI being applied to improve outcomes for business, which means better products for the consumers, lower costs to produce those products, and creating value for everyone in the value chain. And I believe that's possible today, but the adoption is slower because it hasn't been made safe yet. It hasn't been made in a way that you could just buy it and implement it. And this has been true of every computer-based innovation for the last couple decades. Businesses adopt the discontinuous changes more slowly. So while businesses were able to buy large computers at the beginning when consumers couldn't, when the PC came along, it flipped this centralized processing to distributed processing. And it took a good 10 years before PCs were used in a meaningful way in a business in a shared networking environment where you could, if you made a transaction, if you changed a spreadsheet, other people could see it, for example. Even that's, fairly recent memory. So I would see that all the ways that AI are being used in our personal life, like Siri, that's AI at its core. It has a good bit of rule-based components, but when you ask it a question, it has to understand how you phrased it. And that uses a neural network that's been developed to understand the intent of your sentence.
So take this to the business listener for us, and let's look specifically at how AI is going to change the way that we do business. So at the one end of that spectrum, you have Putin saying that whoever figures out AI is going to rule the world. Wonderfully dramatic statement from a very interesting source, but you have it, it's out there, and there are others that talk about AI in that sort of a overlord kind of fashion. It's worth pointing out here that Putin's quote is often taken so far out of context that it loses its original meaning. The quote, which comes from a speech he gave to a group of students, is as follows: "Artificial intelligence is the future not only for Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. And it would not be very desirable that this monopoly be concentrated in someone's specific hands. That's why, if we become leaders in this area, we will share the know-how with the entire world, the same way that we share our nuclear technology today." Hearing that quote in context makes it a bit less draconian, but no less profound. Back to our interview with Jack. At the other end, you have these fairly straightforward applications of AI that seem to be getting traction, but minimally, like chatbots, which I know you have a lot of experience with. Give us a sense for where you see the best applications initially of AI that do exactly what you just described, that reduce risk, that improve the efficacy of the business. Where do you think the most traction is to be had?
It's in anything that gives you foresight, being able to predict behavior. And where we're moving from systems that do to systems that think. And prediction is part of thinking. You look at all the factors that are presented to you and make a decision about what you think is going to happen. We all do that every day. Let's take robotic process automation, which in its initial use in business was around systems that mimic human actions to process some information. So now you're not, stamping envelopes and stuffing them. You're running a campaign that's fully automated electronic. The next advancement there was, could we look at how the emails are being clicked on? Are you clicking on the front part of the email or the bottom part of the email? And how do we know? Because we've embedded some logic that allows a system to capture the information. And then another email could be sent or another type of response could be triggered. And that's a system that thinks, that applies judgment while it's doing whatever work it's doing. And what you've been talking about, the ones where systems that will take over the world at some point are systems that learn, that recognize a pattern and apply some logic to execute tasks. That's the future, I think, ultimately. But before we get there, we need to understand what we should do. And that's where I believe predictive AI, or it used to be in the realm of predictive analytics, is the best opportunity.
Why are we having so much difficulty in creating something as basic as a chatbot?
The ones that are gaining more success are the ones that are not calling them chatbots, but they're integrating them into their websites and mobile applications as an additional way to engage with the brand. So here's the answer. I believe that because we're visual creatures, that we will have a big step to move away from being visual to having to read again, or even to listen. Because if the response takes a long time to play back, then you're going to lose part of it and not be able to take action on it. But visual information, if something's displayed in a way that's easy to read and process, then you're going to gravitate to that rather than to chat. So there's one last thing we really need to do to make chat work, and that is humans need to be comfortable with the idea of speaking with a computer rather than a human.
Look, if we're doing something complex, you and I won't hesitate to pick up the phone rather than try to go into endless texts or emails, because I know the conversation will carry more value. We will be able to engage each other and explore the idea and its nuances in ways that we simply could not in written form. When I try to do that with a computer, however, I'm nowhere near, I'm light years away from that sort of conversational ability. Now, Google recently demonstrated an assistant, a personal assistant that would be able to order a pizza for me or schedule a haircut, and it sounded very convincing. But I wonder how low the threshold is for complex conversation. I would imagine it's quite low. Are those the kinds of conversations that you think we should be having or will have to evolve into having with AI for it to finally be pervasive and to really change our lives? Or can we do it without that level of conversational capability?
I like the Google demo, but like many demos, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We do know that Google has access to information built in their applications they've created over the years, Google Maps, Google Business, where that information can be used by their automated algorithms on the back end to do amazing things that other businesses can't do. Why? Because Google isn't sharing. They're not licensing that to anyone. You need to contact the Google service, make your inquiry and get the information back so that your chatbot can display something intelligent. And while that may or may not have a fee, you've created a dependency on another AI that you have no control over. That's where interactive virtual assistants, we have a good degree of risk.
You're listening to Foresight Radio on this week's episode on AI with Jack Crawford. Want to know more about how AI is changing the way we will live, work, and play? My latest book, Revealing the Invisible, finally clears the fog that has gathered around AI to describe a new world in which our very survival is based on understanding, leveraging, and collaborating with intelligent machines. Revealing the Invisible is available as hardcover, Kindle, or Audible book at Amazon.com and all booksellers, or visit revealingbook.com. Now back to my interview with Jack Crawford. You know, there's a wonderful, I don't know if you follow Black Mirror at all, the cable series. It's on Netflix. I've watched a number of episodes. It's a fascinating sort of peek into the future, very well done, well produced. But there's an episode of it called Be Right Back, in which a woman loses her husband or a boyfriend, I can't remember which, in an accident, and she then recreates him through AI. A service is available that will first allow you to use her spouse's public texts, tweets, chats, what have you, and then his email, and then ultimately the apex of the episode is that she can actually order a full life-size replica of her husband. And it's a very disturbing episode because you can see her struggling with the fact that she's trying to communicate. She can in some ways communicate with this AI in a very human way, but she knows it's not human. And it sort of brings us to this inevitable question about AI, which is, how do we treat it? Do we treat it as though it were a human entity? Do we talk about autonomous vehicles that will own themselves at some day? Do we give them legal rights and legal standing? And I know we're going out on the edge, but I'd be fascinated to get sort of your perspective on where you think the long-term trajectory for AI might take us, and if in fact these are flights of fancy, or if you really see us getting to that point where we're having at least conversations with AI that are indistinguishable from those we would have with a human being, and ultimately are able to create entire personas through AI.
I think about the mechanical Turk. You'd walk up to this carnival toy that has a puppet, and the puppet would respond to you. But underneath the puppet in a box is a human being. We can use humans to make certain types of AI seem more human and to fill those gaps where the intelligence is missing. It's not up to me to tell you when. You asked your earlier question, are we 10 years or 20 years away? What I feel is that the intelligence that we're building into systems is creating systems that can create their own systems. This idea that discoveries that advance humanity in medical science or aircraft engineering is certainly happening as we speak, where things are getting better because the computers we created are discovering new ways of doing things. This is in the realm of systems that create, which is another category of AI. But we're going to see more and more of that. And so what's happening in a robot-like, human-like conversation is just that other android, the expectation is that it'll create something new. It won't just parrot back what it's learned through a set of rules. That could be both disturbing and useful. It could be useful if this is a robot that is a companion, like the emotional support animal. It doesn't have to do much. It just has to be there and be happy. And then if it moves up the chain of animal intelligence, it ultimately becomes human intelligence. And I believe that's at some point going to happen. But it has really nothing to do with how businesses would use forms of predictive analytics that can be enabled with machine learning, anomaly detection where you're looking for those outliers that can be really helpful to know, prevent disasters, for example, that if something goes outside of a boundary, you want to be able to anticipate it and cope with it. Those are immediately available and are improving at a dramatic pace. So if you don't implement something today and your competitor does, in 6 months you're behind, and you're worse than behind because now they're using that to build something even better. This progression in AI is moving so fast that it will catch many people by surprise. The science fiction aspect of it will take longer. It'll take humans longer to accept it. But you don't need a lot of humans to accept the idea of having your own personal robot to make it successful economically. As we went back to mobile phones, the iPhone didn't have a lot of sales the first year. But today, who can imagine being without either an Android phone or an iPhone or anything that has a big screen? I'm using an iPhone, and I'm not afraid of it. Some people are. Some people turn off their location awareness because they don't want the big system in the sky to know where they are. In my case, I get some value out of that. When I use Google Maps, it knows exactly where I am. It can help me get to my destination. The AI knows where I've traveled to in the past, what time of day it is, and perhaps where I might want to go now. It doesn't disturb me very much that the AI is able to predict that for me because I know a lot about how it was programmed. And the way it was programmed is on millions and millions of trips that people have taken. And Google doesn't need everyone to adopt in to get that information. They only need part of it. You probably only need 100 million to train a model that can do that kind of work. So now that that's there, it doesn't need us anymore because it's learned. And because it's learned, it can predict behavior for anyone because we fall into a pattern. We're not altogether different from one another. We're just different from most of the people we know. And doppelgangers everywhere as far as the machine learning understanding of what you are. We're just not terribly different across the entire population of the planet.
So you bring up a fascinating point in talking about the importance of having access to large amounts of data. There's a critical mass of data at which we can develop some intelligence about a certain task, a process, a group of human beings, devices, natural organisms, and ecosystems, whatever the case might be. However, I've also heard you talk about this. It seems that the companies that have access to those volumes of data, I could count on one, maybe two hands at most. Will those be the companies that ultimately are the ones that are able to really leverage AI because they have access to the data? And what happens to the small and medium-sized businesses, even the larger businesses that don't have that much data? Are we creating a bifurcated world here in which some organizations have the ability to build AI because they've got access to the data and others simply don't, or they have to license that data from the organizations that do have access to it?
Yes. You're right. And it applies not only to businesses like Google and Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, Apple, who have access to a tremendous amount of data. It also applies to nations. Vladimir Putin's comment is not something that anyone should ignore. He just said it out loud, but it's quite true. And nations have the advantage of being able to, large nations particularly, able to spend immense amounts of money. In my view, in China, where human resources are at a much lower wage rate than the US, and they have quite a few more to choose from, that they're able to create models that we simply can't create here. So collaboration between a nation's governments and a company can be very valuable. Here's the problem, though. Google's a multinational company. Apple's a multinational, a global company as well. And although they may be headquartered here, their tools and models they've created may be used elsewhere. So then we go back to something we did with hardware, and that's export controls. This is going to get very interesting and, in my view, rather ugly. And it's going to be ugly because the possession of data, if it's used with algorithms, will provide tremendous leverage for anyone who has them.
You're listening to Foresight Radio, and we're taking a quick break to thank our sponsor of this episode, Wasabi Technologies, the leader in the next generation of cloud storage. Find out more about Wasabi at wasabi.com.
Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage is a proud sponsor of Foresight Radio and their mission to help rethink the future of how we work, live, and play. At Wasabi, we're rethinking cloud storage. We're less expensive than just the maintenance on your current on-premises storage. And we're 80% cheaper and 6 times faster than Amazon S3 with no egress fees. See for yourself with unlimited storage for a month. Go to wasabi.com, click free trial, and use the offer code FORESIGHT.
And now back to Foresight Radio and my interview with Jack Crawford. I would love some good news, because I think the path we're going down right now has the potential to scare the daylights out of a few people. Good news, please.
Okay, so 2 bits of good news. One bit is that all of these algorithms are being published, and they're not terribly innovative at its core level. So, I could create, you could create, some algorithm that would do some machine learning prediction, for example. And why do I say that? Because there are tools that these large companies have already made available to everyone where you take your data, you plug it in, and next thing you know, you're getting a predictor. Salesforce.com with their Einstein product has one. Microsoft has a level that makes it very easy for developers to do it. There are a few startups that have even easier ones. And they've done this because the demand is there. It takes a tremendous amount of mathematical acumen to be able to understand the formulas and that are used in these types of mathematical processing. It's all just math, right? So having that math expertise or having it programmed into a tool that helps you build it is a great thing. So that's part one. So good news. Here's the second part. I read a paper last week, and there are others that have come out recently that have created ways to create models with far less data. What I mean by create models with far less data, not only far less data, but also much faster. So it might take Google 2 weeks to run on a large amount of data. You could run in 2 weeks on a very small amount of data, or in 1 week in a small amount of data, or 1 hour, depending on the task that you're seeking to automate. It's wonderful news. So this encourages me greatly. In my view of the business world, the part that I can contribute to are middle market companies. These are companies that are under $1 billion in revenue. Maybe they're over 100 employees that are willing to invest and spend some money on this. Not a lot, but now it's now accessible to them. And most of them have a large amount of transactional data about customers. If you've been in business for 10 years and you've been shipping product, you probably have everyone you've ever shipped to. You probably have every order date, time, stamp, what's in their checkout box of everything you sold if you're an online retailer or an actual retailer with stores. Extremely useful, valuable for predicting behavior for humans. So it's no longer falling into the realm of just Google or the NSA or whoever's trying to figure us out. You can use these tools today, and if you don't, it's at your peril if you're a small business or medium-sized business.
That's the point I want to pick up on, because I think a lot of folks that are listening in to this and who are interested in AI and how it will evolve and how it will change our lives, the way we live, work, and play, are asking themselves the question, what will happen to my business? Because we talk about how AI will get rid of 25 to 40% of all jobs that we have as individuals, but I think at the same time, it will probably have a similar effect on businesses, that those that aren't ready, that don't take advantage of this, will quickly find themselves well behind the curve, too far to catch up. So the question that they have is, how do I stay at least within striking distance of that curve so that I know I'm doing the right things to be ready when my industry or my customers begin to shift and demand these sorts of AI-driven services from me? So on the one hand, I'm encouraged by what you were saying, because there is a democratization, as you've put it, of AI on the one hand. On the other hand, you need to be doing something as a small, medium-sized, mid-market business to give yourself the opportunity to take advantage of these technologies. And I suspect from what I've seen, there's not a whole lot of that going on in small and medium-sized businesses. Much of it is happening in very large businesses. So what's your advice? How do I even begin to create the knowledge base and the tools and the skill sets to be within striking distance of the AI curve?
I don't think you need to develop all the tools and the skill sets. That's a technically oriented notion. The tools are getting easier to use. You can find boutique consulting companies that can do this for a small business. You don't need to be Netflix, right? You're trying to run a small business, a medium-sized business, whether it's something that's outside of the Fortune 2000. And if we walk into any bookstore, if there still remain, if there's a Barnes and Noble out there, and go to the business section, or if you go onto Amazon and look in the business sections, you'll find books by authors like you and by Jeffrey Moore and others. And I'm looking here on my shelf, and one of the titles of a book that Jeffrey Moore wrote, beyond his Crossing the Chasm, was Dealing with Darwin. And the subtitle is How Great Companies Innovate at Every Phase of Their Evolution. I just started reading his book. I've read his other books. This one I haven't yet. And it really, the winning idea is to change your business process. Not to worry about the technology that's necessary to enable changing the business process, but the hack is this. If you bring new technology, you have to wait for people to use it. If you change the business process and use automation to enable it, the employees have no choice. And they also buy in because they participate in the business process. Change, if it's a company that's well organized and follows principles of management that are good practices. Try to understand where the choke points are, where the waste is, and then having that knowledge of what AI can do, look at some type of improvement that can be accomplished to cut out some waste, whether it's waiting time or overuse of resources, improperly trained people, whatever it can be used. Now it's not an efficiency play per se. Yes, you get the benefit of the cost savings, but the real change is value. Value to the customer because the product is better, and value to your organization because you have people doing things that are taking advantage of their human training, their value, their ability to process things that computers can't do, instead of doing rote activities. We should move beyond rote activities, let the computers do that, and begin to use our minds in ways that make our businesses excellent.
I've often heard similar comments, which lead me to believe that maybe one of the things that we fear with AI, as we do with most technologies, is that it sort of ups our game as humans. It forces us to really define what greater value we can deliver. We've done that very well up until now, and I have little doubt that we will continue doing that, but it does create that challenge. And that can be daunting because that requires a lot of social retraining on a broad scale. So do you see the disruption? Because there's a lot of gloom and doom being peddled when you hear talk about AI from very prominent people. Of course, one of the people who has been most concerned and vocal about AI is Elon Musk. Here's a short clip from a speech he gave at the World Government Summit in Dubai that I attended in 2017, where he talks about how AI may very well be just as threatening as a visit from an alien species. Elon Musk.
I think one of the most troubling questions is artificial intelligence. And I don't mean narrow AI, like vehicle autonomy I would put in the narrow AI class. It's narrowly trying to achieve a certain function. But deep artificial intelligence, or what is sometimes called artificial general intelligence, where you could have AI that is much smarter than the smartest human on Earth. This, I think, is a dangerous situation. One way to think of it is imagine we're going to be visited by super intelligent aliens in, let's say, 10 years or 20 years at the most. Super intelligent. Digital super intelligence will be like an alien.
What's your take? Where should we be vigilant if we should be? Or is all of that fear unnecessary stirring of the pot just to garner attention?
I don't think it's meaningful for business. It may be meaningful for us personally. We need to decide if we can live in a society where we're giving up more information in order to get something in return for it, where we're willing to see automation play a bigger role in how we receive benefits or are treated. Are we being treated fairly by government now that the human's been taken out of the loop? Are the right laws in place to protect us from danger? Pharmaceutical industry, for example, needs to make safe drugs, and they need to promote them in a way that doesn't encourage doctors to use them in an unsafe manner. Could we use computers to continue that education and to put controls in place? And the answer is yes, of course we can. Is that a malicious AI that's doing it? I think there's a self-correcting part, which is more people will die, we'll notice, and less people are healed, we'll notice. So the ability for systems to correct themselves, because we are ultimately the consumers of everything we create, I believe will guide that. What we can't prevent are, to a degree, a weapon of mass destruction. Nuclear weapons would have been invented no matter what at some point in time, whether or not they were invented in World War II. It's a problem that could be solved, and the application of it was terrible for the world as a whole. But it had peaceful applications as well. And that's where I would look at AI. How can nuclear energy be used to help the planet safely? Now, how can AI be used to help the planet safely? I think it's tremendous opportunity, but that fear is getting in the way of doing little things that are really powerful and useful. And for business, those little things matter because you only have to be a few points better than your competitor to take their money away. If you're marginally better, you may win all the business. And so market share situations where you have two competitors, they may be 50-50 to begin. One implements some form of AI that gives them an advantage, finds their market share going to 70%. I would hate to be that 30% market share company. It's just unnecessary. Why not keep up? The delay here is no longer a luxury. We can't wait in business because AI is moving too fast. The applications of these algorithms to give competitive advantage is occurring far faster than the mobile phone did. It won't take a decade. Back to your question, it'll take months or a year to make big changes. We watched it happen in the last 3 years. The advancements are amazing, and they've happened very quickly. And businesses who have not yet adopted are going to see the impact of that in their bottom line over the next 3 years. So we've got to get past the fear. The fear is just science fiction to a large degree. Not that it won't happen. It's just it's not going to happen. It's not happening now. It's not affecting you, and you can't stop it anyway. So use what you have to do something for good.
I love that last comment. I think that ultimately, as with any technology, the sword cuts both ways. And our challenge, certainly to some degree, is to make sure we try to minimize the downside. But there's only so much control we can exert over that. As you said, nuclear weapons would have been developed one way or another. The destructive power would not have been averted. But what we did is we created many more applications of nuclear technology in medicine, for example, that saved countless lives. And that's our challenge, is how do we apply this to create more value? In the time we have left, tell me something about AI that I wouldn't even know to ask. Is there some aspect of AI that you think we usually just ignore at our peril? We don't ask about it, we don't talk about it, but which to you is a significant piece of this conversation?
Our behaviors are being captured. The information is being shared to a large degree through these essentially micro auctions. So a micro auction would be that when you click on a website and you select something of interest, that your interest can be sold in less than a second to somebody else, essentially sold at the highest bidder. So if I click on a Red Bull ad and trying to learn more about it, now a sporting goods store or a product manufacturer could get that information and direct their advertising to me. Or the next time I'm shopping, I'll get something that's related to it. And this ability of artificial intelligence to put us into these profiles where our behavior can be manipulated is already in place. It's already happened to us. Train has left the station. What one could do is develop buyer's resistance. Don't give in to every recommendation that's given to you. Be thoughtful that these machines are very aware of your intentions and that your behavior should be less impulsive. That's how you can do better, but it's not changing. Advertising is getting better and better and better, and it's happening within seconds or less.
So when we look back to technologies that have had a similar effect on us where we've had to give up things that we didn't necessarily choose to give up, but they became part of how we lived our lives, GPS being one of the best examples of this. We can always, in retrospect, now say, well, yes, but we got enormous value for it in terms of safety, in terms of convenience. There are many ways that we could measure the value of GPS. Yeah. Do you see anything similar in AI that you think might be a bellwether, a benefit that we're just not necessarily factoring into the equation yet, that you think would be a significant turning point and a watershed moment for AI when we look back and say, you know what? How did we ever survive without this fill-in-the-blank ability?
I think the idea of a simulation of our environments, taking games beyond where they are today, where we become fully assimilated in the environment, will lead to such mental pleasures, mental satisfaction, fulfillment in your mind. Because as I said earlier, the rest of our bodies are a life support system for our brains. That's where all the action happens, is in our heads. And what this technology has the ability to do is to tell you what you want to hear or give you the experience that you want to have. There will be controls of some kind to have you limited from having experiences that are dangerous to others or dangerous to yourself. That's our society today. But imagine this. You hop in this self-driving car. The windows begin to show scenery outside that doesn't match the scenery you don't like. You're on your way to work. It's going to take 30 minutes. What do you want to look at? I want to look at beaches and sunshine. Whatever it is, begins to become an immersive experience where the computers begin to actuate in your real-life environment. They create something for your senses. Today, that has to be done through actual physical engagement. In the future, it may be through some way of interacting with your brain. And what could be remarkable is I see something that other people don't, and they see something different. And we'll adopt it, we'll be part of it because it'll make our lives better. It'll make it more enjoyable and more fulfilling and take away stresses. They're already there. Don't miss this. We listen to music for a reason because music is a human thing. It makes us happy. It changes the way we feel. If we took music and art out of our lives, we would find a real gap in the way we feel every day.
One of the things that is driving so much change and will be for some time globally is the changing nature of demographics, age demographics specifically. There's got to be a connection there. These are two huge drivers, economically and socially, the aging demographic and the advent of AI. What's the connection between the two, if there is one, Jack?
The first one is that the intelligence that's being created is giving birth to new intelligence, new discoveries. So medical care will improve. The quality of our lives and the length of our lives should both improve over time. But the quality of our life improvement from medicine is going to lag the duration. And this is a significant economic problem, a significant lifestyle problem. So the second part is, where could AI play a role with virtual assistant or some other type of supportive mechanisms to help people live longer? And one is robotics. I am looking forward to my first exoskeleton. I have aging parents that are using walkers and crutches to get around. Other people have elderly people that are in wheelchairs. Just mobility would be the most wonderful thing for me, so that I'm not as dependent on my loved ones around me. And independence could be a major improvement. And it takes artificial intelligence to have an exoskeleton work properly. And an exoskeleton, I mean something that is your new legs, your new arms, your other bodily functions with robotic. Tremendous opportunity there. And the other one that I mentioned was some type of emotional guidance and support, or maybe even something that trains your brain to make the degradation slower.
It's amazing when I talk to audiences, I consistently ask them how many plan to completely retire, just unplug totally, where they're no longer adding value or realizing value from their accumulated knowledge in any formal way, in a business context. And every time I ask that question, fewer and fewer hands go up, if any, at this point. We all want to remain engaged. We want to continue to be connected. And in many ways, the depiction of old age looking backwards has been one where you lose your freedom. You are able to do less, increasingly have less and less value to add. And I think that's the exact opposite of what I see when I talk to people. Jack, wonderful to have you joining us. A fantastic tapestry that you weave of all the many experiences that you've had. And it really is incredible to think about where AI will take us. But I think, to your point, also very important to start making steps today in that direction and to move our organizations and our businesses closer to AI and to the many changes that are inevitable. So thank you very much for joining us on Foresight Radio, Jack.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for hosting it, Tom.
That was Jack Crawford speaking with me about artificial intelligence. To find out more about Jack, just click on the link on the Foresight Radio homepage at foresightradio.com. Thanks again to our sponsor for this episode of Foresight Radio, Wasabi. Take a look at how Wasabi is changing the rules of the game for cloud storage at wasabi.com. This is Tom Koulopoulos. I look forward to joining you again for another episode of Foresight Radio as we explore the future of how we will work, live, and play.